Welcome to the night section. I don't know about you guys, but the year 2011 was probably the most influential year of music for me as a hip hop fan and artist. I mean, I was finally old enough to understand the music I was listening to while still being young enough to have that curiosity to search for the gold. I was discovering different artists and different sounds. Hip hop felt a lot different then. It obviously evolved from the 90s to the early 2000s, but it felt like a time where artists were really innovating. Before the big boom of the quote-unquote Lils and popularity of a lot of these mumble rappers. It was less melodic, but don't get me wrong, a lot of these artists started to adopt a lot of the melodies, but it was way less than today. The emphasis was more on lyricism, but even more than lyricism, it was the uniqueness of the artist. So today, I'm just going to briefly talk about a few artists who I found out about in 2011. 2011 was the year I discovered Kendrick Lamar for the first time. 2011 was also the same year he released Section 80. It was the song Rigor Mortis that I landed on rummaging through YouTube watching random videos. At that time, Rigor Mortis was maybe in the hundreds of thousands of views, so I just clicked it. And note that this was a couple months after the release of the album. But at that time, I had no idea. No idea who Kendrick was, nothing. But once I heard that song, I instantly became a fan. It was like a red pill moment for me. This had me going down the rabbit hole. Now, I absolutely had to listen to the entire album, and I became obsessed with Kendrick and just wanted to understand how he can craft the songs the way that he does. High Power was a song that was big for me in terms of songwriting, but also how he made a politically charged conscious rap song catchy and not corny. It wasn't the kumbaya come together let's hold hands type of song, but it was a song where he spoke his truth on the verses about controversial world issues, drawing parallels to his own personal experiences as a black man. The song specifically inspired me to really look in depth on the content of the type of music I personally wanted to make. This proved to me that you can be both, a conscious rapper and someone who understands musicality. So I had to know more and understand. I went as far as to check out his earlier mixtapes, more notably Overly Dedicated. That mixtape is probably one of the greatest mixtapes I've ever heard, and that still stands now 10 years later. I wanted to rap like Kendrick. I wanted to really study him. By default, I became a fan of everyone on TDE. I love Black Hippie. Whenever Schoolboy Q, J-Rock, Ab-Soul, and Kendrick Lamar would all hop on records, or even if a pair of them decided to drop a song, I was blasting their music in my room, no question. I love that they were all branded by the same cloth, having that artistic integrity, which we can say is really lost, especially in the mainstream. They all had their own styles and approaches, and though Kendrick Lamar even during that time was getting a lot more buzz, you can tell that there was no jealousy among them. They celebrated each other's individuality, and you could tell that they were for real brothers. 2011 was also the year I learned about the ASAP mob, A$AP Rocky in particular, who dropped Live Love ASAP, his debut mixtape the same year. The first video I ever saw from ASAP was the Purple Swag video. If you guys recall, it was on the lower budget side, obviously in the beginning. But I just wanted to point that out because they still managed to capture the feel and energy of the song. I remember the video getting a lot of attention due to the white girl wearing grills mouthing his lyrics, and overall just his unique style that he brought to the forefront. It was stoner music, a crazy mix of that cloud rap but still bringing the Harlem, New York flavor. And I think A$AP Rocky and the entire ASAP mob paved the way for a lot of artists we hear now, and the artists from New York especially at that time, because we weren't hearing that type of music coming from New York. A$AP Rocky, in my opinion, popularized the pitching of his voice to create the slow motion, chopped and screwed effect. Not to mention fashion, whether that be having the braids and wearing gold grills to wearing tighter fitting clothes or playing around a lot more with high fashion brands. I don't think he was literally the first to do these things, but he definitely had a huge impact on the popularity for both the music side of things as well as fashion in this new era of hip hop. And of course, I can't forget about Odd Future, Wolfgang Kill Them All. I think they just completely destroyed any standard or conventional structure of hip hop. They technically formed in 2007, but really started getting buzz from 2010 to 2012 when other members including Domo Genesis, Earl Sweatshirt, Mike G, and Frank Ocean joined. The original members were Tyler the Creator, Left Brain, and Haji Beats. And once again, 2011 was the year that I found out about them. The first video I ever came across was Earl by Earl Sweatshirt. And I don't know what it was about them, but I think they gave such a great representation of the diversity of black kids. Even though they were wilding out and doing the absolute most, I just think it was great how they showed that black kids could be into skating culture and all those other types of stuff too, because hip hop for the most part from the early to late 2000s, at least in the mainstream, was the thug life gangsters sagging pants to your ankles type of rappers. But obviously thanks to artists like Kanye, Kid Cudi, and Lupe Fiasco, and many more who helped pioneer in the early 2000s the idea that you don't have to act like a thug to be successful in hip-hop. This paved the way for a group like Odd Future to do the same, but with our generation growing up. Not to mention, Odd Future also pushed a lot of boundaries in terms of their visuals. If you guys recall, Tyler the Creator's Yonkers, for example, where he actually ate a cockroach and puked it on camera, then basically sat back down to continue rapping his verse. Then by the end of the video, ended it all, essentially. Or even a video like She, a video featuring both Tyler the Creator and Frank Ocean, where it wasn't your conventional love story type of music video. There was a lot of satire involved in that music video and just telling an entirely different story in the visuals that you would probably think to tell by hearing the song alone. One of my favorite videos of theirs was actually released in 2012 called Rella by Haji, Domo Genesis, and Tyler the Creator. I think that video was actually hilarious, so random but so creative. Overall, just pure entertainment. My favorite part was when Domo slaps a black girl and she turns Asian, but also Tyler appearing as half man and half horse, and let's say he was inhaling white powder. I'ma just say that so YouTube doesn't get me. Even me just describing the video shows how out of pocket they were, but it was great. Not to mention their musical content and lyrically the diversity in their approaches. Earl was really hitting us with the multisyllabic rhymes, but did it so effortlessly and at such a young age. And Tyler really just brought his own style with his very monotone and deep voice. A lot of his writing has been very introspective but dark, especially back then, which we could say was the case for all of the active rapping members of Odd Future, but I would say especially Tyler and Earl. The same year Tyler dropped Goblin, which I thought was absolutely incredible, and I think just spoke to young kids in general who were feeling on edge and angsty and turned to the music as an outlet. Crazy to think that Tyler was only 19 at the time when he dropped that album. Also, I really loved that they even had R&B artists. At that time, Sid the Kid, who's part of the internet, and Frank Ocean, who also made his debut in 2011 with Nostalgia Ultra, which in my opinion is Frank Ocean's greatest project to date. Overall, as a group, I think what they did was legendary and really paved the way for alternative rap and artists who are just different. It was a great era, and I was glad to be able to witness it at its beginnings. But like anything else, it has to eventually come to an end. Mac Miller is another artist that comes to mind when I think back to 2011. It's heartbreaking just thinking about his passing, but man, I really grew up with his music. And 2011 was one of his peaks in his career. He joined Kendrick Lamar that year on the XXL Freshman cover along with other artists including Meek Mill, Big Crit, Sci-Hi the Prince, and Lil B, among others. The first mixtape I actually heard from Mac Miller was Kids the year before, and ever since then I've been an avid Mac Miller fan. My favorite song off the project was Kool-Aid and Frozen Pizza. I used to bump that song every single day for at least a year on my way to school. And what I really liked about Mac Miller, and the reason why I think other people were also so drawn to him, was the fact that he was just being himself and was actually really able to rap. In 2011, he dropped 4 projects: Best Day Ever, On and Beyond, I Love Life Thank You, and his debut album Blue Slide Park, which was actually the first independent album to debut at #1 on the Billboard Top 200 since Snoop Dogg's The Dogg Pound in 1995. Unfortunately, the album didn't have the best review by some outlets, but nonetheless, I think it was good for him to get that critique artistically because he grew from that whether he realized it or not at that time. One of my favorite projects was Watching Movies with the Sound Off that came 2 years later. A lot of his music in general back then was more so on the mellow side of things. that college rap, appealing to young people in college or even kids like me who were in middle school at that time. Though today, I wouldn't necessarily be jamming out to his music from back then, just listening back to some of his singles including Knock Knock, Party on Fifth Ave, or even throwing it back to Nikes on My Feet, you can hear the fun that he was having making music. He seemed happier back then in general. It also just personally brings me back to good memories and a sense of innocence within myself as well. What he did for the culture was impactful and will never be forgotten. So rest in peace. Let's also not forget that 2011 also had major hip-hop releases from already established mainstream artists like Watch the Throne, a collaborative effort from both Kanye West and Jay-Z. Drake's second and biggest album, Take Care, which is arguably one of his best albums if not his best, which also accented and introduced Toronto's wave of lo-fi darker sounds, which we can credit The Weeknd for helping bring that to light, no pun intended. Not to mention the releases of Echoes of Silence, House of Balloons, and Thursday by The Weeknd himself, if we want to include R&B into the mix. Other notable mainstream hip-hop albums that came out in 2011 include Rolling Papers by Wiz Khalifa, his debut album, Big Sean's Finally Famous, also his debut album, and guys, I can go on forever and this video will be 2 hours long, but I just thought I might share some of the artists that I admired back in 2011. You guys let me know in the comments who you loved back then, or who you discovered, or who influenced you. Once again, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe, hit the like, hit the bell notification if you do want to see more. Night Section out.